Your wife is here. With another man. That was the text I got at 9:43 p.m. on a Thursday night, while I was sitting in the hospital lobby waiting for the results of my mother's latest scan. I read it 3 times before it made sense, and even then, it didn't make sense. I stared at the sender's name, unknown number, local area code. I thought maybe it was a prank, maybe a wrong number. My wife, Emily, was supposed to be at her sister's house, babysitting our niece. We'd talked just 2 hours earlier. She told me they were making popcorn and watching old Disney movies. The text was followed by a photo. It was grainy, taken from across the street, but there was no mistaking her. Her hair was up in the loose bun she wore on lazy nights, her oversized beige sweater falling just past her hips. She was stepping out of a bar I didn't recognize, her hand in the hand of a man I'd never seen. His head was bent toward hers, close. Too close that I don't remember leaving the hospital. 1 second I was in that stiff plastic chair, the next I was driving through the rain with the wipers doing nothing to keep up. The bar was only 15 minutes from the hospital, but by the time I got there, the doorway was empty. Inside, it smelled of fried food and beer, the warm fog of laughter rising from half-filled tables. I scanned the crowd until I saw her. Emily was at a corner booth, sitting across from the same man from the photo. They were leaning toward each other, her hands wrapped around a glass of wine, his fingers tapping the tabletop as he spoke. She looked happy. Not the kind of polite happy you give acquaintances, but the open, easy happy I hadn't seen in months. I didn't make a scene. I didn't storm over. I just stood there long enough for her to look up and see me. The way her face fell, that was the moment I knew whatever was happening between them wasn't new. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even say her name the first time. I just stood at the end of the aisle long enough for Emily to follow that prickle you get when someone is watching you. Her smile froze before it fell, like a glass slipping from a hand in slow motion. The man across from her turned to look at me with the open curiosity of someone who doesn't yet understand he's in a story that's already started without him. "Hey," Emily said, voice too bright, too brittle, like she'd rehearsed only the tone and not the words. "What are you doing here?" I didn't look at him. "What am I doing here?" "I got a text with your location and a photo." I held up my phone. "What are you doing here?" "A beat. 2. Then, this is Wes," she said, gesturing with 2 casual fingers. He's a coworker." "We were just, coworker where?" I asked, because the lies people tell while seated always forget details that require standing. She blinked. "At the clinic." "The clinic that closes at 6? I saw it, so small I might have missed it if I hadn't been memorizing her face for years. The micro flinch. Wes spoke up. "Maybe I should give you 2 a minute." He was already sliding out of the booth when I said, "Don't move." He moved anyway, because of course he did, and he put a 20 on the table like it might tip the situation back in his favor. He nodded at me, then at her, with the politeness of someone leaving a store without buying anything. As he passed, I caught the smell of his cologne, unfamiliar and sharp, and felt the kind of anger that shows up first as nausea. When he was gone, I sat down across from my wife and looked at her hands, because they tell the truth when mouths won't. No ring, she'd taken it off months ago for work, because gloves and jewelry don't mix, and then it just never came back. Tonight her left hand kept pinching the seam of the napkin, making neat little ripples she refused to look at. "Start again," I said. "From the top. The truth." She inhaled like a swimmer before a long lap. "It's not," she began, then stopped. "We've been talking," she said finally. "Talking," I repeated, like I was testing the word for poison. "At a bar. On a Thursday. While telling me you were at your sister's." She closed her eyes, found that one steady thing on the table, a salt shaker, and held it with her gaze. "It started after your mom's diagnosis got worse. I didn't know how to say anything you'd hear." The relief that flooded her face when she found a narrative almost made me sick. There it was, the explanation that painted me as absent enough to create the plot without implicating her for writing it. "So you found a man who would," I said quietly. She reached across the table. I didn't move. I'm not cheating, she said. This isn't an affair. You were holding his hand in the doorway, I said. You look happy. Happier than when you come home. She swallowed, and for a second she looked 16, caught, defensive, small. I can't talk to you about anything without it becoming about your mom, she said, and there it was. The knife she would insist was a spoon. She has stage 4, I said, because I needed the room to remember the math. And I have a marriage, she said, and somehow we were both right and neither of us felt like it. I need. She ran out of sentence. You need what? To feel like I exist. And I remembered in a rush. The appointments, the pill organizers, the beeping monitors, the way our house had learned to keep quiet so my mother could sleep in the spare room. The laundry that piled. The dinners that didn't. The person I had become, competent, exhausted, single-minded to a fault. I paid the bill because the body likes a task. Outside, the rain had slowed to a polite drizzle. Come home, I said, and it was less an instruction and more a dare to myself to believe this conversation could continue in a place we'd once called safe. She nodded, but she didn't take my hand out. We did the slow-motion fight you do when you still live in the same house and neither of you wants to wake the person dying down the hall. The sentences came out in the same order all couples choose. This is not what you think. Then what is it? You don't listen. You don't say anything worth hearing. I needed someone to talk to. So did I. Then why didn't you? Because you were gone even when you were here. She said his name like she wasn't sure if it was allowed. Wes is in my grief group, she said. He lost his wife last year. The detail landed like a line item that expected a signature. We meet on Thursdays, she added, which would have explained the schedule if the location hadn't been a bar. Sometimes we get a drink after, she said when I asked. Sometimes I need to be around someone who understands what anticipatory grief feels like. Someone who won't ask me to be fine. Part of me wanted to accept that half story because it contained words I recognize. Grief does make you ideologically stubborn. It does keep asking for a room where it's allowed to be loud. But a different part of me had already started an inventory. I checked our shared calendar. She'd stopped adding to it months ago. I found a receipt in the trash for a place across town with a hotel upstairs, technically, the kind with exposed brick and good lighting. I opened the credit card app and scrolled through charges that told a story we hadn't agreed to read together. I Googled his name. Of course I did. Wes wasn't a coworker. He wasn't from the clinic. He was a newish resident in town with a LinkedIn that suggested he'd recently pivoted to remote consulting after a layoff. He had a dead wife with a GoFundMe still active and a smile that had learned how to perform its own resurrection. Emily caught me in the kitchen with my mother's pillbox and my phone like I was about to dose one with the other. Are you spying on me now? She asked. I am verifying, I said. Because if this is your story, then it should survive light. I told you the truth, she insisted. You told me a version, I said. And you left out the parts that would make you the villain. The words came out colder than I meant them to, but maybe they needed to. She stared at me for a long time. You want to hear the worst part? She asked finally. I kept not telling you because it felt good to have one thing you didn't get to arrange. I laughed, the bad kind. Then consider this my resignation from the role of your project manager. In the next room, my mother coughed, wet, harsh, a body reminding a house that everyone's semaphore matters. We both went to her door at the same time and knocked the way we do now, softly, with foreheads already bowed. 3 days later, a manila envelope appeared on our doormat like a stray cat. No return address. Inside, 6 glossy photos printed at a pharmacy, Emily and Wes at the bar door, Emily's hand in his as he helped her down the 2 steps, gentlemanly if you want to be generous, intimate if you don't, Emily and Wes sitting close in a booth over the course of what looked like weeks, dates scribbled in the corner in pen I didn't recognize. The last photo was the one that reintroduced gravity, a shot of them at the desk of the boutique inn, Emily looking down, Wes signing something, the time stamped 10:58 p.m. The envelope also held a note, you deserve the truth. A friend. I sat with the photos while my mother slept and let every story try them on. I let the "we just talk" story hold them up like a dress that doesn't zip. I let the "I needed to feel seen" story match them with shoes. I let my own pettier narratives walk around in them long enough to trip. When Emily got home, I had the envelope on the table. I didn't spread the photos out like a prosecutor. I kept them in a neat stack and moved them toward her like a check. This showed up today. She slid the prints out, one by one, and her face did the thing a window does when weather changes: fog, then clarity, then cold. I didn't sleep with him, she said immediately, and the speed of it made me believe her for exactly 1 second longer than if she'd waited. We went up to use the restroom, she added. The downstairs bathroom was broken, and it was freezing on the patio. It wasn't the worst lie I'd ever heard. It was simply the most annoying kind, plausible. You signed something, I said. The guest ledger, she said. COVID-era policy leftover. And the hand-holding? I asked. I was crying, she said, and when I didn't answer, she added, because of your mother. This is where stories break, when one pain is used to excuse another. If you needed to cry, I said, you could have cried at home. Not when you're there, she said. Not when every tear turns into triage. We were two people who had once been good at choosing each other. We were making opposite arguments with the same facts. I told her I needed space, which in our house meant the couch. She took the guest room on the other side of my mother's. We orbited the same hallway for a week, knocking on different doors, wearing the same tired clothes. The text came the next Thursday at 9:41 p.m. Different number, same area code. If you want to know what's going on, ask your sister. I stared at the message until the words got mean. My sister, Claire, had a gift for weaponizing concern. She'd made a hobby of auditing my decisions since grade school. She also lived 20 minutes away and hated Emily in that polite, murderous way siblings sometimes reserve for the people their brothers marry. I called Claire. I'm asleep, she announced, which was how she always answered the phone after 9, even if you could hear a TV in the background. Who's texting you from burner numbers? I asked. Silence. What now? She said, full bored. I got a tip last week, I said. Then photos. Now a tip about you. Oh, she said, and the way her mouth rounded the word told me what I needed to know. She wasn't surprised. She was calculating. I hired someone, she admitted after I waited out her theater. To take pictures. To protect you. Protect me from what? I asked. The obvious, she said. Your wife is cheating, Mark. I know you like the high road, but sometimes there isn't one. You sent me to the bar, I said. You wanted me to catch her. I wanted you to stop being a martyr. She snapped, her contempt finally showing through the veil. Mom is dying and you are disappearing. Emily took the opening. That's on both of you, but mostly on her. It's better you know now than after the funeral. You had someone follow my wife? I had someone watch and confirm what she already told you with her face, Claire said. You're welcome. I hung up before I said what the part of me that still wore the Big Brother cape wanted to say. The next morning, I told Emily where the photos had come from. She sat very still at the kitchen table, then laughed once, without humor. Of course, she said. Of course it was Claire. It doesn't change what's in them, I said, because my hands like to drop hammers when forks would do. No, she agreed. It changes why you're looking. The day after that, Wes texted me. I don't know how he got my number, maybe from Emily, maybe from the group directory. I'm sorry for the blurry picture you've been getting of me. Can we talk? He suggested coffee at noon on Saturday. I picked a diner nowhere near the bar or the inn or our house. Wes looked different in daylight, tired in the way grief sands down a face, earnest in the way men get when they're trying not to make things worse. He didn't order food. He put both hands around his coffee like it might teach him something. First, he said, I'm not having an affair with your wife. You signed into a hotel with her. I said. To use the bathroom. That's the story, I said. Do you have another? He stared at his coffee. I wanted to, he said finally, and that part rang truer than anything else anyone had said to me in 2 weeks. I wanted to because she was kind to me when I was most alone. Because she remembered my wife's name when everyone else forgot it. Because she said the thing that no one says, that some days the grief feels like attention you didn't ask for. And because you were not there. It should have made me angrier than it did. Instead, I felt the odd relief of hearing the unspeakable said out loud. But, he added, I didn't. She didn't. We sat in a lobby until she stopped crying and then we went home. To separate homes. He slid his phone across the table. Texts with timestamps. The kind of receipts that tell a story if you let them. Are you home? Yes. You? Yes. Thank you for letting me lose it. I know that looks like something, he said, but it isn't what your sister wants it to be. You met my sister? I asked, and he shook his head. Her PI did, he said. He followed us to the parking lot and had opinions. I sighed. If you care about Emily, I said, you'll stop texting her after 9. He nodded. If you care about her, he said back, you'll let her feel what she feels without trying to solve it before she's finished saying it. It was infuriating how correct he could be about my worst habit. I'm not your enemy, he said. I didn't take anything from you. Not yet, I said. He winced. Fair. We parted with the strange courtesy of two men who could both be villains depending on which paragraph you enter the story from. My mother died on a Tuesday afternoon that felt like a Sunday in disguise. It was quiet, merciful, they call it, as if mercy is always quiet. Emily sat on the edge of the bed with me, our knees touching, the kind of domestic intimacy grief permits even when marriage withholds it. Claire arrived 10 minutes later and began to arrange the room with her voice, instructing a space that had already learned obedience. The hospice nurse did the kind of invisible work that makes you believe in competence as a language. After the phone calls and the forms and the moment where the house exhaled because it no longer had to hold a kind of breath, I walked into the kitchen and found the envelope of photos on the counter, exactly where I'd left it the day it arrived. I picked it up, walked out to the trash, and fed it to a bag with last night's coffee grounds. It felt symbolic in a way I didn't trust and necessary in a way I did. That night, Emily and I lay on opposite edges of the same bed and didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., somewhere between the house settling and the street cleaner passing, she said, I kissed him. It was a confession without spectacle. One time, she added, as if the number mattered, it did and didn't. Outside his car. I wanted to know if I could feel anything other than this. I thought about the photograph I didn't have, from the angle no one captured. I thought about the ledger of my own absences, the dinners missed, the hugs dodged, the conversations ended with, not now. I thought about the way we'd both been auditioning for other roles. Did it help? I asked, because the question mattered more than the outrage. She was quiet long enough that I thought she'd decided not to answer. For 30 seconds, she said. And then I felt worse. The honesty felt like a small bridge laid across a river that had decided it was an ocean. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry too, I said, and it didn't fix anything. It gave us something to hold while we decided whether to fix anything. We tried a therapist because the internet says that's what grown-ups do when they stop knowing how to be grown-ups together. The office had 2 chairs and 1 couch and a plant that looked better than any plant I'd ever owned. We told the story the way couples do, each of us skipping the parts where we were worst, then adding them back in when the room didn't flinch. The therapist had the kind of face that knows how to absorb impact. She asked us to write down what we needed to stay and what we needed to leave. Emily's list was both shorter and more expensive than mine. No secrets. No Claire. 1 night a week where we talk about anything but your mother. My mother is dead, I said, and she nodded. That doesn't mean she left the room, the therapist said gently. My list, no lies. No bars. If you need a man to understand you, make him your therapist. If you need me to understand you, be brave enough to tell me the unflattering version. We exchanged lists in a ceremonial way that felt less silly than I feared. For 30 days, we did the practical things: password transparency with the kind of caveats adults need, blocking and unblocking numbers with explanations, grief group for both of us, separately, dinner at the table instead of beside the TV. We failed at all of it at least once and tried again the next day. She told Wes she needed a boarder. He told her he understood. He meant it, which made me like him and hate him in alternating breaths. Meanwhile, Claire texted me 3 articles about ways to tell if your spouse is a narcissist, and 1 photo of a house for sale in her neighborhood. In case you're smarter than you've been acting. I muted her and felt taller for an hour. 2 months after the funeral, a letter from an attorney informed me that my mother had changed her will the week before she died. Not the part that mattered. My mother believed in even splits and wrote like a judge. But the part that turned a sibling rivalry into a case study: she had left Claire the house and me the investment account. On paper, equal. In practice, a grenade? Claire called before I'd finished reading it. "I'll buy you out," she said, already triumphant. "You can have the money you care so much about, and I'll have a place where her voice lives in the walls." "You hired someone to take pictures of my wife," I said. "You don't get to talk to me like this is about love." "Everything is about love," she said, and hung up, which is a thing only bullies and poets say with a straight face. I told Emily about the will. She sat on the bottom step and stared at the banister with the hairline crack my father put there, moving a dresser in 1997. "Sell it to a stranger," she said softly. "Don't let her canonize herself in a museum that used to be a home." It was so exactly the right thing to say that I almost didn't recognize it as forgiveness. We listed the house. We showed the house. We accepted an offer from a couple who said things like, "We can see our lives here," without sounding like a commercial. On the day I handed them the keys, I walked through each room and said goodbye in the unremarkable way grief requests: light touch to the door frame, a nod to the window that framed 13 different sunsets I remember and 100 I don't. Emily held my hand in the foyer and didn't let go when Claire pulled up and pretended not to cry. We didn't put everything back where it was because where it was hadn't worked. We built something slightly left of our old life and agreed to call it home anyway. Emily kept going to grief group, but she stopped going to the bar after. She still texted Wes sometimes, and when she did, she showed me, not as proof, but as a courtesy. I stopped making my love a checklist disguised as a calendar invite. I asked fewer "How can I fix it?" questions and more "What hurts today?" ones. We had setbacks, of course we did. Trust grows like those stubborn little plants that push through sidewalk cracks, too slow when you stare at it, miraculous when you look away. 6 months later, on a night with no particular reason to be remarkable, Emily set down her fork and said, "I haven't worn my ring because I didn't deserve it." She stood, went to the bedroom, came back with the small velvet box, and placed it on the table between us. "I don't want it to be about deserving anymore," she said. "I want it to be about choosing." She slid the ring back on. I didn't clap. I didn't cry. I reached across and touched her wrist gently and said, "Me too." And it was the most adult sentence I've ever said. If this were Reddit, this is the part where I'd give you the clean ending because the comment section likes its bows tied, or the burning ending because rage tastes good when it's someone else's. But here's the truth I promised at the beginning: sometimes you find out your wife is holding another man's hand while your mother is dying, and it doesn't end in a hotel room or a divorce court. Sometimes it ends in a therapist's office where 2 exhausted people write lists and decide to test them against the weak. Sometimes your sister is the anonymous tipster because she believes pain is a scalpel and not a cudgel, and sometimes she's wrong about which end she's holding. Sometimes you throw photos away not because they're lies, but because they're heavy and you're tired of lifting them. And sometimes, months later, you'll reach for your wife's hand in a grocery store while she's debating tomatoes, and she'll squeeze back without looking, and it will feel like standing in your mother's kitchen at 14, stealing bread from the cooling rack, which is to say, ordinary and perfect in a way you didn't know you still had access to. We're not fixed. We're not broken. We are two people in a house like 1,000 other houses, learning how to tell the truth sooner and how to sit next to it when it isn't flattering. If you need a bow, tie this one. I blocked my sister and unblocked my wife. And if you need fire, keep this coal. I still don't know who sent the very first text, the one with the photo outside the bar. Some nights I tell myself it was no one, that it was fate playing hall monitor. Other nights I think it was me from some future, trying to get my attention. Either way, it worked. I'm paying attention now.